This is going to be an overview of the V3 lighting features available in the official editor. Just note there are a lot of options in V3, and the best way to understand and get familiar with all of these is to experiment and play around with it yourself. In V3 lighting, the top level objects are called groups. In each group, we have 1 to several lanes, which affect the lights based on the side panel options. And the objects in the lanes are called events. By default, when you place a group event, it will contain a single lane which affects everything. This makes it function similarly to basic V2 events. You have your ons at various brightness levels, fades at various brightness levels, and first and second environment colors as usual. These function as you'd expect. A useful quality of life event in V3 is the extension event. If you've ever placed a fade and wanted to delay the fade, you'd have to place the same object slightly delayed so that the fade is delayed. Instead of doing this, you can just place an extension event, which holds the previous event state. This is handy so that you don't need to remember what you placed before. For V3 lighting events specifically, strobing functionality is built into the event, so you don't need to manually place several events to create a strobe. You're able to specify how fast the strobe interval is, how bright the strobing intensity is, and whether the strobe strobes between on or fade events. Now let's go over what the side panel options do one by one. First up is the duration option. This determines how the lights are affected over time. Wave spreads the lights out such that it ends after the specified number of beats. It's set to 0 right now, so all the lights will turn on at the same time. When I set this to 4, it'll light up over 4 beats. When there are multiple events, the last event has to end at the specified duration. Because this event here has to end at beat 4, this event here will light up over 2 beats. The other events here will also light up over 2 beats each as a result. Step affects each light every specified number of beats. When I set this to half, each light lights up after half a beat. Next is the filter and order option. This is a pass that determines which lights are affected. By default, chunks are set to 0, which means each of these lights is assigned to a different ID. In this case, we have 12 IDs. With the step on half, we see that each of these IDs lights up every half a beat. When we set the chunks to 4, the group is now split up into 4 different chunks. So we have 4 IDs, and each of these 4 IDs will light up over half a beat. Section splits the assigned IDs into groups based on how many sections you specified, and the ID selects which one of those sections to light up. Since we have 4 IDs here, using 2 sections, we'll split this into a section of the first 2 IDs and the second 2 IDs. So here, this will light up the first of these sections. Setting ID to do will light up the second section. For step and offset, the light hash here determines which of the IDs to start lighting from, and the step determines which will be the next ID to light up. Here we see that this starts on the first ID, second ID, third ID. We see that the step here is 1, so this will light up 3, and then the next one will be 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. If we set 2 here, it'll light up 1 and then 3. If we set chunks to 0, you can see that this lights up every second ID. Setting step to 3 will light up every third ID. Setting it to start from the second light ID, this will light up every third one from that. The reverse option is pretty straightforward. It just reverses the order that it's lit up in. Normally the lights are lit in order. If you select random, they'll light up in a random order. Pressing this will generate a random seed for the random order. Limit is another pass that affects the lights after filter and order. Limit is a percentage, so setting this to 50 means only 50% of the lights will light up. Since limit is applied after the previous options, we see the event here will only last for 2 beats. If we want to extend the duration to last as long as the original duration, then we click the duration so it scales back up to 4 beats. And finally, we have distribution. Distribution adds additional brightness evenly spread across the lights. By default, this will not affect the first event. That's what the affect first option's for. With the wave on 100 here, we see that the first event is the same, and from the second event, it starts growing in brightness. The first ID brightness is at the original value of 20, and the last ID brightness is 20 plus 100. Turning on step flashbangs us, since the last ID is now over 1000 brightness. The easing types determines how the additional brightness is distributed over the group. Linear means the differences between each ID is the same. In easings means the differences start small and grow bigger towards the end. Out easings means the difference starts big and are small towards the end. And in easings, the differences are the most prominent in the middle. This covers the features in V3 color events. Let's move on to rotation events. Rotation events affects the angles of the lights. The way rotation events fade in from one event to the next is determined by the easing. This is the none easing. It transitions instantly. Just like brightness distribution, we have access to linear easings, quad in, quad out, and quad in out. In rotations, we also have access to more easings such as elastic and bounce. By default, rotations are on order direction, which takes the shortest path. You can explicitly set the rotation direction to clockwise or counterclockwise if you want to override them. If you want to rotate more than 360 degrees, then you can add loops. And just like with color events, the extension event also exists here. The side panel options in rotation events are very similar to color events. The difference here is you have the axis options, which change how the lights rotate, and the flip rotation, which flips the rotation. And that covers rotation events. Newer environments also contain translation events. Translation events affect the position of lights. These work similarly to how color and rotation events do, so you should be able to transfer your knowledge over to those. And that's an overview of V3 lighting.